Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Julia Borston. I'm CNBC's Senior Media and Technology Correspondent, and I'm so excited today to get to host this conversation about the future of advertising. The title of this is Machine Learning on Madison Avenue, but what we're really talking about is the fact that marketing and advertising really sits at the intersection of creativity and technology, and more so now than ever before with the rise of AI. And there's no doubt that technology will continue to play a bigger role in marketing and advertising. So to talk about all of this, we're joined by such a dynamic panel to talk about the future and what's possible. And I'm so excited because we've been talking ahead of time. This is going to be really great. We have at the end here, Americus Reed II, the Whitney M. Young Jr. Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School and University of Pennsylvania. We have Devika Bulchandani, CEO of Ogilvy and Mather, which just won all the awards last week at the Cannes Lion Festival, so she's fresh.
Thank you for that plug.
And Dustin Kwan, the Chief Product Officer at Viant Technology. I want to start with you, Americus, sure, because you've done so much award-winning work on this idea of identity-based consumer behavior.
Yep.
Tell us what that is and how also you see technology broadly and social interactions and all these new platforms influencing that behavior and purchase decisions.
Yeah, I love that question. Thanks, Julia. I think that for me, I think about when I study identity, I'm interested in understanding how do people form a sense of self-expression through objects, through products, brands, services, organizations, and even things like technology. So I'm really interested in your digital self as it exists out there, and then how that affects the types of things you choose to do or not choose to do and things of that nature. And I can, as an academic, I remember the moment where we were panicked when, as colleagues, my fellow professors ran into my office and said, they're using ChatGPT to do our assignments. And it was a moment where like, or what are we going to do? Are we going to try to like, in a draconian way, shut this down? Or is this coming? And what's going to change? And how is my educational landscape going to change? How are consumer behaviors going to change? All of these different kinds of things. So I really believe that in the context of how we navigate our own sense of humanity in deploying these sorts of tools is going to be a very interesting kind of philosophical question, and also a question of how our lives change as a function of these new technologies. So I'm excited to have this conversation today to unpack some of those issues.
But then also just to get a sort of definition of terms here, what is identity-based consumer behavior and how has it evolved over time? I just want to sort of define our terms.
For sure. Some brands are able to transcend what they do and to become part of who you are. So I want to study that. I want to study the great brands that create tribes, such that they are the people who consume, they're not just like eating that thing, or they're not just wearing that piece of clothing, they're not just drinking that drink, but they are expressing something about themselves, and they believe that through doing that they are creating this community around the product. And so I want to understand how that works, and I also want to understand how technology plays into that and then affects our subsequent sense of who we are and how we navigate this identity that we're trying to evolve over time in the marketplace.
Fascinating. So Dustin, Viant has this AI solution that's all designed to streamline not the creation of the content of the ads, but the distribution of the ads, putting the ads in the right place, ad targeting, and also measurement of how effective the targeting is. Walk us through how your business deploys technology. And I know everyone here who's ever watched streaming video has seen an ad that you've deployed.
Yeah. So just at our heart, we're an ad tech company. Basically, that means we build software that enables advertisers to run their campaigns across the internet. That's video, that's display, that's all of it. So if you're on Disney Plus, if you're on CNBC, if you're on other places, you've probably seen an ad that's powered by Viant. From our perspective, what we've seen is obviously there's a great need for creative functionality, creative efficiency, but there's also, when you think of creating a campaign, it also is something where there's a lot of planning and complexity in it. You've got various sites that you can look at, like going to the topic of Mad Men, there were 3 networks back then. Now you have 50,000 CTV channels. So think of that explosion. There are I think, more than 7 million apps that you can advertise on. There are more than 25 million websites you can advertise on too. So you think of the complexity of that, and someone trying to manage that campaign and run it is both inefficient and nobody can keep up. And so what we're deploying from an AI perspective is really looking at that and trying to drive that efficiency both at the kind of like pull the levers and don't make people click buttons. Nobody wants to spend their time clicking buttons in a console all day. But at the same time, what we want to do is we use that intelligence and have the machines work for us and enable us.
Yeah, and then it's interesting to see how that ends up influencing the content down the line. But we'll talk about that more. Devika, talk to us about the big picture perspective that Ogilvy Mather has taken to embracing AI. And then I know you have this amazing clip you're going to show us that's going to blow everyone's minds.
First, I have to say, you're talking about machine learning on Madison Avenue. There's no agency left on Madison Avenue. So I was just thinking about that. I said, I guess there's no machine learning then, because there's none of us on Madison Avenue.
It's a figurative Madison.
No, but it's amazing, right? That's a bit of branding.
Yeah.
That's lasted forever, right? Even though there's nobody left there, we talk about Madison Avenue, and everybody can conjure something up. So it actually talks about the power of a brand. So we're not a technology company, right? We're a human imagination company. We have 15,000 people over the world, and all they do is use their imagination to create products and solutions for business problems that our clients come to us with. And as we think about those solutions, in the 50s, we had to use TV. It was new. And then we had to use the radio. All of this stuff at some point was new, and there were tools in our toolkit to be able to unleash the imagination and do things in new ways, connect to our consumers and our audiences in new ways. So now, here we are. TV apparently is dead, right? Print is kind of dead, I believe. Everything is kind of dead. AI is the only thing that is alive and kicking. So what do we do from an AI perspective or a machine learning perspective, from a technology perspective, in terms of unleashing the human imagination? I want to talk about two things. I'm going to show you a video. One, if we look at technology and AI specifically, it's really democratized a lot of what we can do. It's democratized knowledge, but it's democratized things like celebrity access for the little guy, and that's one of the videos that I'm going to show you. The second thing is personalization, which you talked about as well. Today, with all the proliferation of channels we have, we can actually reach our audience much more targeted, much more personal, so they feel like the brand's really talking to them as opposed to you being one of many. So here's an example of where we've used technology. Technology is not the star of the show. Technology is being used to do something and deliver some utility, something for a consumer. I have to explain it for 1 second because it is an example from India. There's a celebrity called Shah Rukh Khan. I don't know if any of you know Shah Rukh Khan, but if you know Brad Pitt, he's the Brad Pitt of India.
Probably bigger.
Probably bigger. Actually bigger.
Actually.
And we used Shah Rukh Khan with machine learning and AI to be able to do an ad for every small business during the pandemic when they weren't getting business. So without much further ado, let's play the video and then we can talk about it.
Big brands have big money to hire famous people, but not the small guys. And they are the ones who are still hurting. Presenting Shah Rukh Khan, My Ad.
Welcome, Shah Rukh Khan. He almost certainly has more devoted fans than any other movie star in the world.
Biggest movie star in the world.
Forbes have called him one of the biggest movie stars in the world.
We helped small businesses by making Shah Rukh Khan, the world's biggest movie star, their brand ambassador.
इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास वाले फैशन और एम्पोरियम से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। सिद्धिविनायक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स से लेटेस्ट स्मार्टफोन खरीदकर धमाकेदार सेल्फी पोस्ट करना।
क्या कर रहे हो? मीठा लाएगी?
We used machine learning to recreate Shah Rukh Khan's face and voice to take the local store names in the ads.
आप भी ना अपने पास वाली चॉइस ऑफ फैशन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। रॉयल फैशन से ही, MK क्लॉथ्स से ही, पास वाली लक्ष्मी कलेक्शन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग।
Different versions of the same ad with local store names were targeted as per the PIN code of the viewer, showing them only the nearby stores. But it is impossible to cover all the stores. So we gave the power to the people to create their own version of Shah Rukh Khan, My Ad. Any small business owner could promote their stores through their own social media networks like WhatsApp forwards and other social media pages.
It is Shah Rukh Khan selling your store, man. If you're a small-time retailer or a merchant, what an amazing thing to have.
Cadbury ad is an ad campaign that has gone viral.
A new ad which stars Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan is winning hearts all over social media.
And what we are learning is that over 1 lakh local stores have already created their own ad with Shah Rukh as a brand ambassador.
दुकानों के नाम पूरी सेलिब्रेशंस के दिवाली एड में शामिल हैं।
सपने में भी नहीं सोचा था कि शाहरुख खान मेरे दुकान का ऐड करेगा।
Shah Rukh Khan, my ad.
That was so cool. Also, like that's obviously the biggest celebrity in India, but can you imagine if actors in the U.S. were doing that? It would just be really transformative for small businesses. So before I get the reaction from the other panelists, Devika, what was the reaction to this, and was there demand for more things like this?
Yeah, I mean, we still have every partner of us coming to us to say we'd like our Shah Rukh Khan, which we obviously can't do it because we need to make brands different. But one of the best things I want to share, Julia, is we asked ChatGPT if ChatGPT could come up with Shah Rukh Khan, my ad. And I'm going to read you, it's a very long response, but I'm going to read you a bit of it. And it says, the concept of an advertising campaign, especially one featuring a specific celebrity like Shah Rukh Khan for Cadbury Celebration, involves a blend of creativity, blah, 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 4 paragraphs. And then it says, in summary, while AI can be a valuable tool in certain aspects of advertising, the conceptualization of a campaign, especially one involving a celebrity and cultural nuances, remains a distinctly human endeavor.
So that's really what this is all about, this intersection of human ingenuity and technological capability. So Americus, from your experience and perspective and all the research you've seen, how do consumers, and we were talking before about demographic differences, I'm curious about how consumers across the demographic spectrum react to technology like this. They know this is AI generated. They would have to be AI generated. Are people wary? Do they like it?
I think they like it. I mean, I think it's one of these things where it's a new sort of engine that drives a lot of creativity. And I think as long as brands and services and organizations are smart enough to not get seduced by the tool itself and really understand that the tool is really there to help facilitate a creative process or amplify a creative process, then it's good. But I also think consumers are very savvy in the sense that when they see lots and lots of messages or lots and lots of attempts to try to make engagement and create transactions, that can kind of turn them off as well. So I think there's a fine line to be able to create this creative context that's resonant and drives a really powerful value proposition for consumers, and not sort of create a situation where they're immediately turning off or tuning out because they recognize that, hey, this is just another one of these attempts to like deep fake a way into getting me to give them some of my money.
So deep fakes can be used strategically, but shouldn't be used too much.
Shouldn't be used too much. And I think that consumers are smart. And so they're always sort of looking for something that's going to add value to their life. And it's a misnomer to believe that consumers don't like ads. They don't like irrelevant ads. So the idea that you can create something that's very powerful that creates that value proposition that resonates with them, they're happy to hear that, and they're happy to bring that into paying attention to that in already what is a very crowded sort of attentional deficit world.
So, which totally makes sense. But to me, the question for Dustin is, this seems like it's going to create a massive amount of ads and more potential content to be targeting to consumers.
I think it does, and I do think this is a great example of AI used right. Right, it's with consent, people know it's transparent, you have control over it, and I think that's the key to AI. And I think in the same way, if we start to do this people start doing this in various ways at a broader scale, that same transparency, control, and guidelines need to be there, that tech companies need to build in to manage and drive products so that we have the right outcomes for consumers. And I do think that that aspect of hyper-localization and super personalized ads can be really great. It could also be dangerous in some cases, and so finding those right use cases and when you do that is also important.
When you say dangerous, what do you mean by that? What do you think could be, like, what is seen as dangerous? Is it just overdoing it? Is it the commoditization of this kind of content, or is it more people feeling like, oh, they know too much about me, this is creepy?
I think one of the biggest things is, you talk about identity, and as we get more and more personalized, we're showing people more and more of who they are, and not actually painting a picture of a diverse world, right? And we talked about that earlier as well. So there's a danger in that, right? We do sit around the TV around Super Bowl and consume a lot of a shared experience around advertising. So if you get hyper-personalized, you don't see anybody who doesn't look like you, who's not of the same belief. We do start creating echo chambers that we talk about, by the way, from a media perspective, but then advertising and hyper-personalization does more of that. David, can I give you this? I can't seem to turn it off. Sorry. Thank you. Good catch.
Good catch.
I don't know what's
Yeah, but in terms of this hyper personalization, Dustin, that's what your technology is all about. You want to deliver the personalized ads. So how do you think about measuring the impact? I mean, a lot of what you do is not just targeting, but also measurement. Give us some examples.
I do think that's sort of the conundrum of personalization, right? On the one hand, businesses are businesses. They're there to make money, and advertisers want to drive brand or conversions. And so when you think about that, their goal is not necessarily to think about the social good or social justice of it. Their goal is actually to try to drive the best performance in ways that don't break laws or create negative ill will. From our technology perspective, I do think that that's where there is no clear line. Like if you ask somebody, well, how much personalization is too personalized? You'll get different responses from all of us and probably everyone in the room. And so I think that's where that control comes in. The technology can't be given the control of that, right? People have to decide that, at least for now. And I think in the future, I often kind of think of AI as a genius child, right? A few years ago, it's like a toddler who can learn a lot but didn't give you great answers all the time. You skip forward a year or two, and it's like it grows in dog years. So it's like now it's a teenager. And it's still great answers, getting smarter, giving us better things, but at the same time, it's still, like, do you really trust a teenager with your campaign? Do you trust a teenager to do things, and I don't mean to put anything down on teenagers, but, that responsibility, I think, falls onto us to drive.
And are there any case studies that you've seen where the data you're getting is saying, hey, this demographic really responds well to this, and this demographic isn't? If we're going to be selling Stanley Cups to teenagers, they need to have a different marketing message than to 70-year-olds.
Yeah, definitely we're seeing, and that's where I think AI can help with the data. So there is this thing, I also asked AI a while ago, I was doing a presentation in Colorado Ad Day, and I said, what are some bold predictions? And AI told me that it thought it would take over advertising. It thought that
we'd all be jobless.
Yeah, it will surpass human creativity, and that it will everything will be hyper localized and personalized. And when you see those answers, those are not answers you want to see, right? As an adult or as someone who's kind of driving a campaign, like that doesn't sound right. And so what we're looking at is it's really looking at the data. And so as you run all these campaigns across hyper-localized areas, it's very hard for you to manually put together 50,000 stores or 130,000 different ads, but the AI can do that. And so that's using the tools to drive the things that can drive the right outcomes, and then you as a person, using that assistant to make a decision on that.
So Americus, what do you think about all of this? This idea of hyper-personalization, is this what consumers want? Is this what works for brands?
That's a tough question. I think that consumers like it because it does feel personal. So I think there is a very strong psychological reaction to anything that feels like it's being expressed in direct, consonance with you. So they do like that. No one likes to be sort of ubiquitously talked to constantly. So there is a kind of an interface of doing this the right way and at the right cadence, so that consumers don't become too overloaded with it, and that they can continue to really, trust in the technology itself. I mean, an interesting point about all this is when you ask the average consumer about artificial intelligence, they almost don't know what it is. And so they know it's this thing, it's maybe like this chatbot thing, it kind of talks to you, you do a generative thing, ask it questions, it gives you answers. It's one of these, it'll recommend things on the website if you've read books of a particular type or watched certain things on Netflix before. It'll tell you, well, here's something you might like. That's AI, but they don't really understand, what's under the engine and large language models and all this kind of stuff. But they're willing to trust it because they're able to see that there's a value proposition that's there that resonates with them. And again, this notion of personalization from an identity perspective is really tapping into a feeling that this is someone who not only knows things about me, but wants to add value. And it's because they're signaling that personalization piece that creates a different kind of an emotional connection than, say, what would be something like with more of a mass kind of approach.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll add a small anecdote about some of the things I saw. In a former life, I was working at the world's largest bookstore, which you probably have all heard of.
Amazon.
And I was driving ads, and specifically device ads. And so when you turn on your tablet, your Amazon Fire tablet or your Kindle or your Fire TV, you would get ads. And some of these could be very personalized and recommended for you. And the danger we had from consumers, on the one hand, was you don't want to show someone a medical ad. If somebody has a medical disease, you don't want, they can turn on their device in front of other people, and that's a bad example of where policy has to come in and say, nope, any of these medical conditions or medical at all, don't show it. Right? Obviously, there are things around maturity ratings and other things. Same thing; those were there. My funny example is actually, as I drove this program, we would get complaints from executives. And what executives would say would be, they turn on their Kindle and they would see romance ads. And they'd see these steamy, half-shirted guys on their Kindles. And they'd say, like, why am I being targeted for this ad? This doesn't make any sense. And the answer was, well, somewhere in the recommendations, either you or somebody in your family probably has interest in romance ads, and so we're sending you these ads. And that's the same. It's another bad example. It's like, as an executive,
you went
or
to a dating
else,
website.
Yeah.
You didn't tell anybody.
Or maybe you do like romance ads. We don't know. It's what the algorithm is telling us. And so putting those rules and restrictions, and some of it's just common sense, but a lot of it is we have to set clear guidelines and boundaries so that we don't end up, because what you'll end up is, if you have these gray areas, people will take advantage. And so we've got to make sure that we enable that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about regulation in a second, but I want to go back because, Americus, you mentioned the word trust. And ultimately, all good marketing is based on trust. You trust the brand, you trust that the representation you're seeing is gonna be accurate. And you mentioned something earlier that I think you should share about young people trusting what they see on TikTok or pretty much any platform. We saw something that was a deep fake in this ad, and I think about the election and the risk of election manipulation with potential deep fakes. This is something I report on at CNBC, and I'm wondering if you think there's a risk that if someone's like, that's not a real actor delivering that they won't trust it, and how you see that playing out.
Yeah, I think it's a huge point, but I think that's where the transparency piece comes in.
Yeah.
And really being super upfront about the things that you're creating, the deliverables that are your outcomes for trying to draw attention into your messaging and things like that. Again, consumers, it's trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of these technologies facilitating better information or more useful information coming into you, they trust that. And then the younger consumers are just much more trusting because they're growing up sort of, in these digital spaces, and they're consuming their news and information on TikTok and other things like that. So we notice in the research that younger consumers are naturally more trusting, but even they have a tolerance to where, if things get too much out of control, too much sideways, they will respond in a negative way.
I'll give you an example of, there was a recent study where Dove, we work with Dove a lot, I think was number 5 on the trust scale, 5th most trusted brand. And it was really interesting. I think it was Google was number 1, and 2 was UPS. And I was thinking about it and going, okay, I can't live without Google. I can't live without my mail coming in. And then there was a bar of soap, right, at the trust barometer. And it got me really thinking about, why is Dove, in a list of things that I can't live without? And if you see what Dove has done, we've actually used deepfake a lot. We've actually used all kinds of sort of technology to reveal the toxic beauty that social media, the toxic beauty standards that social media creates. So we're not using it as a stunt. We're not using it just to get some hype or get some commercial interest for 5 minutes, but it's really being used to reveal something and to jar the audience. And what's fascinating about that is it's in the human interest first, and Dove's business has been growing double-digit, since this. I'm sure you're all familiar with the campaign for Real Beauty. It's probably one of the most famous ad campaigns. So you can use deepfake, and you can use these technologies if you do them in the right way, and where the brand is actually living up to what it says and build trust, as opposed to using it in the wrong way. And that's just a great example in my mind of being able to use all these technologies.
But it's actually sort of showcasing the power of deepfakes to be transparent.
Exactly.
Highlight the importance of transparency and honesty. So I see why the bar of soap is up there. Another big issue when it comes to trust with the advertising industry has been questions about privacy. And we were talking earlier about how we're now in a cookieless world and you can't track people with cookies. And that raises questions about sort of the safety of data and personal data. How do you think about data and privacy and cybersecurity in a world where people are getting hacked all the time?
I do think that this is where regulation is actually playing a good role. And not just in the US, it's also in the UK and other places as well, where they're starting to look at and understand the challenges with privacy. Because as America said, most of the youth actually have no interest or knowledge of privacy, and they kind of ignore it and they think it's fine. And so I think you have to have these protectionistic laws to kind of prevent some of these things from happening, because there can be so much damage, especially with the rise of AI, where you can hyperscale. You can hyperscale a lot of negativity and damage also. And so, so I do think that that's where it really is going to lie. It's going to lie on the regulation side. But I do think that tech companies and all companies, corporations as well, advertisers, in order to protect your brand and protect your company, you don't want to be associated with those things. And so there's an aspect of kind of public pressure and corporate pressure as well.
You know, we did a study once on this very issue, and it was fascinating to see. People are willing to look at their own privacy as a value exchange, as almost a currency. And I think what's fascinating today is that we think we are getting a lot, or there's things that I'm getting from this world where my privacy is okay to give up. Yeah. Because when you have a serious conversation about it, people always say no. But when you look at behavior, so stated intent versus real behavior, they're two very different things. And I think we were discussing this earlier.
Yeah. Americus, you're nodding here. And I'm remembering something you said earlier about how people sort of get used to giving away their privacy, or they get used to the creepy ads that follow you around the internet.
Yeah, it's a normalization process.
On my phone listening to me?
Yeah, we don't want that. I think it is interesting.
And yes, it is listening. Yeah,
it is.
That's why I was bringing it.
That's why somebody's...
Yeah.
This is true. I think that, from a trust perspective, I agree with everything that's being said here. There's a lot more trust, especially for younger consumers. But if you breach that trust, there's also the flip side of that. There's a much more averse reaction to not wanting to come back to that particular brand and things like that. So it really is something you have to be very, very careful with, even though we recognize that there is a lot of trust with younger consumers. The other thing is I think is important is that it's really important, I think, to establish a track record around, if you're a brand, like I love the Dove example, because one of the things that they did, which was so good, was they established like an idea, like we want to be a thought leader on something, attacking an issue that's very important, and what are the ways that we can do that? What are the ways that we can raise awareness for everybody in a way that benefit? And when you have that, it's sort of like trust is like a bank account. If you're putting deposits in every single day as a brand, a product or service or whatever, then you have something to play with should something go wrong. And so when brand crisis hits, if you've been doing that sort of good stuff and using these tools in responsible sorts of ways, then you can recover much easier because you have built up that goodwill over time. So it's very important to make sure that there are components in place, that these tools are deployed in very responsible ways, and that you're creating a track record about being important about doing that in the right way.
I think the flip of trust, though, is we also have a younger generation that's very promiscuous when it comes to, there's lack of loyalty. So the value of actually trusting brands, which in our generation, I think we placed a lot more of it, they don't place the same value on trusting the brand because they're just generally more promiscuous, and they will, and especially because of connected commerce, and today I can buy from anywhere, anytime, they just experiment a lot more.
Yeah, and then also just the post-pandemic piece is driving a lot of people toward asking the question of what's important in my life. And what are the things I can get rid of in my life? And some of the brands that didn't develop those stronger kind of relationships fell by the wayside because when people had this sort of self-awareness moment of, you know what, I want more experiences, I want more things that are richer in my life. And if you're not on the cutting edge of figuring out how to create those relationships, you're probably going to be at a pretty robust disadvantage.
The concept of trust reminds me to segue to the question about regulation, because a lot of the state-by-state regulations around AI, and we're seeing so many regulation proposed bills pop up across the U.S. different, which is creating a patchwork issue for the tech giants, which is problematic. But a lot of them are about transparency, labeling use of AI and ads, making sure people understand what they're seeing has been manipulated. And I'm curious how you see regulation impacting your work, your world, and if you think that it could be beneficial, or is it inevitable, or is it just part of the process?
I think very positively. I think very positively of kind of privacy laws and changes as well. The big challenge is that if there are no controls, people will do what they want to do, and there are always bad actors that we know that are out there that will do some of those things. Yeah. And so for me, I think it actually helps us because as someone who drives an ad platform, or who our customers are advertisers and marketers, we want them to have highly performing good campaigns. We don't want to have creepy campaigns or falsehoods in that. And so enabling our customers and putting out the rules, which also level the playing field, I think, for a lot of people is a very positive thing.
I share your view. I'm very sort of optimistic and hopeful that, and we need it. We're going to need some sort of regulation so we set the right standards and don't have the bad actors. But also importantly, at the end of the day, it is an existential question for humanity too, right? These issues that we're talking about are not just in advertising or Madison Avenue, they're much bigger. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that the regulatory piece is huge. You know, and also just trying to keep in mind the tool is kind of agnostic to any good or bad. It's how it's deployed, right? It's like a hammer. The hammer isn't inherently good or bad, but you know, you can take the hammer, build a house for someone, or you can take the hammer and hit them over the head and take their wallet. And so, you know, it's how are you deploying the tool, and let's be very aware of and cognizant of when it is misused and having those controls in place to be able to bring those sorts of problems to the forefront and, you know, sort of responsibly address them in real time. That's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and then we could talk about what kind of legislation actually get passed in another session. But I am going to open up to questions from the audience. But first, I'm going to ask you all to do a little bit of a crystal ball situation here. Rewind 2 years, everyone was here, and they were talking about the metaverse, and they were talking about augmented reality and virtual reality. ChatGPT had not launched 2 years ago, and yes, we knew about AI and machine learning, but those are more sort of just tech tools and not revolutionary innovations the way generative AI has been. So look ahead 2 years for me. At the pace that we've seen AI advance just in the past 18 months, I would suspect that the world looks pretty different in 2 years from a technological capability perspective. What do you see your work looking like in 2 years? How is your world different? We'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm very bullish on AI. I'm a converted skeptic. I was very skeptical at first, and then as we start, and you know, all the proof comes in using it. So as I started using it, and others started using it, and we're seeing it being used across industries, you know, I became much more bullish on it. I do think that it will revolutionize advertising and a lot of the things we do, you know, even the phones that we have, you know, and I really think of that as that personal assistant, right? So it will understand you better, it will be able to do things for you that will save you time, save you energy, and possibly make things move faster for you. And so I think that time savings will be invaluable. I do think that we'll hit some speed bumps in the road and probably have some hopefully minor disasters that happen. And so I think we have to both plan ahead and be vigilant on those as well.
Yeah, I share some of your beliefs, but you know, I think AI is going to actually really help us because I think one of the most important currencies today is human energy. Because all of you here, are you overscheduled, tapped out, exhausted, overwhelmed? The answer to all of that always is yes. And when you look at the younger generation especially. So if we can take away some of that grunt work that we don't need to do and release sort of our imaginations to be able to do the higher level thinking, I think that's a win-win for all of us. So I do look at a world where I think our industry will be transformed, where we will have much more higher level work. We'd have a lot of what we call in our industry tier 2, tier 3 work be more automated. Yeah. But I'm glad because I don't know, none of you in the industry, but I always ask the young kids in the industry, do you wake up in the morning and say, I want to resize a banner 50,000 times. That's my mission in life. No. You know, I want to write a report about a meeting that happened. And I want to write it every day of my life. No. So if AI can take that away and actually give the human imagination, and the other thing I always say is boredom is good. We don't have time to be bored. So if it takes that away and lets our imagination and our minds be more bored, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic.
Oh, you were telling me we were too optimistic.
Yes, I just have to pay attention to the dark side. There's a great film called Her with Joaquin Phoenix, and how you can get pulled into this technology and removed from humanity. I'm worried about that a little bit. I agree 100%. There are certain types of things that are very well suited to be automated, but the human spirit really is about many times like being in a place like this with the physical energy and interacting and engaging. I mean, pretty much we could get this information from the device, but it's very different when you're actually sitting with people and having these real-time conversations with real brains that aren't artificial. And so,
but we'll have more time to
we will have more time. That I agree with, right? Because time is the most precious resource, and when when it's gone forever. So I think there is kind of this double-edged sword. I pay attention to the dark side because I'm always nervous because many times the science fiction writers get it right. So when they say, if I'm watching a movie from Ridley Scott or James Cameron and these guys say over and over and over again, be very careful about letting these types of intelligences get too, powerful. I'm paying attention to that.
So the question then is job losses. I'm moderating a panel tomorrow about the workforce in this new tech-driven world. Do you think that this is going to result in meaningful job losses for the industry?
I think our industry from a job perspective will shapeshift. And I think a lot of industries will shapeshift. New industries will come up. We're going to need more people who know how to use AI. We're going to need more people. We're actually developing a tool right now where we have a whole technology group, which we didn't have. Right? So we will be employing different kinds of people because just a large language model doesn't actually work in our business. We need to train that model to become smarter on a particular brand. So we now have technologists, and we're acquiring companies that we wouldn't have thought of acquiring 10 years ago. So I look at it as shape-shifting. Are some jobs going to go? Yeah. But different ones are going to emerge.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Sorry to interrupt. 100%. I think that, I was thinking about having a conversation about creativity and how does this tool, and the human spirit is what's important, right? The notion that you're not going to be able to move away from. You need the idea, you need the craft, and you need the strategy. And you're always going to have some human oversight to be able to sort of craft that. So some jobs will go away, obviously, but others, it will force you to be better at what you do. Because if what you're doing is not really adding value and can be done by some automated algorithm, then you're going to get exposed. So it'll be like the true talented people will really be able to take these tools, and you should be jumping on it as quickly as possible. Take these tools and be on the cutting edge and on the forefront of amplifying what it is that you do so that the net loss in jobs is positive.
Dustin?
The optimist in me wants to say that we'll have job shifting and that we'll up-level jobs and roles. I think like with every new technology and every change, it does disrupt. And this is very disruptive, right? And if you even think of the simple things that we've added over the years, a calculator, you don't have to do math, right? You have computers now, you don't have to, you're getting rid of travel agents through some of these sites. And so I think there will be changes. I can't say I have the right crystal ball on what those will be, and I hope that they will drive more. But I do think we have to, in that same way, we have to be cognizant that this will eliminate some roles. And that change will be impactful for those people, and how do we hopefully retrain or educate in the right way. But I think that I'm kind of not sold either way yet.
Well, Larry Summers just said that that AI will replace IQ but not EQ, which I thought was really interesting. So on that note, I'll open up to questions. There's one right here in the front.
This is for Davik. I love everything that you've said. I think it's absolutely on the mark.
But I sense a but.
No, there's
just I can feel it. Right?
No, there is no but. It's actually an expansion of what you have been saying, which is as these tools make your job cheaper. That also means that you might not need such large. You have one of the largest advertising agencies in the world. Maybe you don't need such large advertising agencies, and your agency will break up into very different components. That's what I was thinking. Have you thought of that?
We have thought about that. Again, I have no idea if this will happen, but there's a possibility where we will become much more of strategists, conceptual creatives, right? But we also have a production company. I think that'll double in size because they'll do a lot of the automated, again, tier 2, tier 3 work. And what you call a pure agency will have just much higher level thinkers, conceptual creative people who come up with the ideas and the technology then enables us to make it. That's a very possible scenario.
There's a question back here.
Hi, I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, so I want to turn back to tribalism that was mentioned earlier. one of the things that has been a common discussion throughout this week has been fraying of the social fabric. If we're hyper-personalized in our ads, and ads are regularly reinforcing our images of who we are and our identity as individuals, how do you stop the natural factionalism and tribalism that is reinforced by the technology that you're deploying?
We talked about this. We actually talked about this a lot earlier.
Do you want to take this shot?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it isn't a matter of I don't believe either or. So I think two things can be true. I think we can have a world where for certain types of utilitarian things that would add value to your life, that personalization can play a role in making things better for you. At the same time, get outside and talk to people and be a human. So I don't think these things are necessarily going to have to be a choice. I think they can both coexist, and as long as we're not letting this sort of, going into this rabbit hole of this digital world where we're staying there and not coming out, as long as we don't let that sort of take over, I think it'll be fine.
I'll just add on. I do think that there's some fair concerns in that, and I think it's what I was talking about earlier, which is there's no clear line, and it depends, and so we have to help build those rules and define those areas. Is it I looked at this T-shirt and I really liked it, and is it personalized for me? That's fine. If I'm only seeing people of my color, ethnicity, race, and it only keeps my bias focused, that's not fine. But I think how do you enforce that and decide that, I think, is the challenge. I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. I think
that worries me a lot.
Yeah.
I don't have a cogent answer, but I think it's something we all need to be concerned about.
I'm going to go back and forth in different sides of the room. So here in the white shirt. There's a.
I'm a bigger kid. Hi, Austin Regalado. I'm program manager at Google, and we've seen Gemini, ChatGPT become the new portal to the web, right? Outside of Google search. So, are you at all, your clients, your partners, worried about, what kind of new modalities are we going to have to advertise through outside of just the typical hyperlinked text or display video ads? Have you thought about what that new medium to advertise to someone through is going to look like?
Yeah, I do think there's kind of the what does it actually do and how does it work will lead into some of that. But I do think it will be a new creative type. I think the challenge with that, I think in that same vein, is like, I remember how search used to be. It was you search for something and you'd see the real results. Now you see sponsored results. What can happen within some of these new systems is now you're sponsoring the AI responses, which is not the real answer. And so I think in that same way, the transparency needs to be there. This is a sponsored result. This is what people are pushing towards you, but here's my first answer outside of that. And so, just to answer your question, I think there will be changes. I'm not sure. It depends on the modal that is it voice, is it visual, is it video that AI plays in. But I think that will be a part of the new economy of AI with advertising.
Question over here.
So I want to pull in a couple themes. One is the tribalization theme, and one thing I haven't heard you mention is that I can now pay a fee to not get any messages from any of you people. Right?
Sometimes.
Wow.
Sometimes.
So it appears to me, looking at it from a few steps back, that there's a lot of business opportunities for people with your skill sets to empower the consumer, which is, again, another theme you're talking about, so that I can select the kind of ads I want to see by theme, and a variety of other variables. Is that something you people talk about at all?
Okay, this
we people
thing.
yeah.
Hold on. That's good.
Do you want to take that? I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there have been actually a lot of ad technologies that have tried that in the past. The challenge is, the good and bad of advertising is, it is advertising. Nobody says they really want to be advertised to. But the bad is that, advertising pays for a lot of the content you view. So if you're watching, broadcast television, those ads, Netflix now, it subsidizes or pays for. And so I do think that there should be options for you to pay your way out of it because that subsidizes the cost of the content you're consuming. But I think that what hasn't shown to work in those kind of selection models is one, like the selections are also usually very small. It's like the people who respond to ads and click on the, I don't like this ad button. It's the macro percentages. And then unfortunately in that same way, when people start to personalize, they also don't perform well. And so that hits the businesses. And so that's the challenge. I won't say that it's the wrong idea or the wrong thinking, but I think the challenge is that what ends up happening is those businesses who are allowing that or enabling that start to lose revenue, and then they go out of business.
We haven't found a perfect solution for it where it works in what I call the human interest and the commercial interest.
But psychologically, I'm paying money to tribalize, right? I mean, you could see it that way. I'm paying money to tribalize.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is if you look at Netflix and the initial rise and success of Netflix was people who didn't want to or weren't going to see ads, didn't want to see ads, but there was a limited audience for people who want to pay to not see ads. And now we've seen every single platform, whether it's Netflix or Disney Plus, introduce an ad option for the rest of the world, which would rather pay less and see ads. So it's fascinating. We have so many more questions to get to here. Over here in the red.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Scott Martin. Live here in Aspen, fortunately. Skied 156 days last year.
I'm jealous.
Well, I'm going to...
jealous.
Can we swap jobs, please?
I write occasionally for the Aspen Daily News, but I'm really a direct response copywriter. That's what I've been doing. Direct marketing has been my world for the last 25 years. And so there's a David Ogilvy video, We Sell or Else, which is all about...
It's all over our walls, yes.
Direct marketing. I've helped companies on teams sell tens of millions of dollars of stuff, products, services, using direct marketing principles, foundations, and direct response copy. I've seen the copy, the direct response copy that ChatGPT and other things produce. And it is junk. It wouldn't sell anything. It kind of sounds good to somebody who doesn't really understand direct marketing, but it is raw junk. Where do you see AI going in direct marketing, the world that I live in?
I'm going to just answer your question a little broader first, which is copywriting, just for a second. I was talking to one of the best copywriters who exists in our industry today, and I was saying to him, I said, and he does not like any technology, doesn't want to use it, and he said to me the other day, he goes, Dev, you won't believe it. I start everything with ChatGPT. And I literally, this was in Cannes last week, and I literally fell off, I was like, you use everything, you start with ChatGPT? And he said, it is junk, but it gets me to the first 50% of what we all do in any case, which is junk, a lot quicker. And
so
I thought that was
is he a direct response copywriter?
He's not a direct, I'm saying copywriting in general, right? But I thought that was really interesting. He said, because even the human process of creation, the beginning of it is you're just getting the junk out, right? And all creatives in our industry will say it. It's like the first idea is never the best idea, right? The second idea is never the best idea. You have to see rounds and rounds of work. And I thought that was a fascinating thing. So he said, I get to that junk 50% just a lot faster, right? And then so I've saved a lot of time, and now I actually have the time to make something great as opposed to deal with all the iterations that you need to get out. I don't know, I haven't spoken to a direct response copywriter on this issue, but I will and get back to you. But a lot of people, by the way, what we are seeing from the people who are using it is that they're getting to things quicker because the human process creates junk too. I thought that was just fascinating when he said it.
I'll add a couple of comments to that one. I've been using the phrase 2 heads are better than 1, or 2 sets of hands is better than 1.
It's a co-pilot.
Yeah, and the only difference is now it's a computer or AI brain or AI hands that are helping you along. For your specific question, what I've seen or we're starting to see across AI is that you're not using ChatGPT for creative copy. There are very specialized tools, and all of them have their own niche. Some are for creative, some are for copywriting, some are for direct response, and I believe those will get better over time, especially because they're specialized in their learning from others in the space. And so those might be the tools that you might think about looking at and using as your second set of hands or brain.
And I'll give you another example. What we've been doing to get the things that we need to do to be better, or David Ogilvy proof in this case, is actually training large language models, because they're just generic bit of information. That's what ChatGPT is. Right? So how can we actually use machine learning, and how can we use our own algorithms, our own technology to train these models to be better at doing things. So we've developed something called a brand brain, an audience brain, a performance brain, a channel brain. But these are very specific things that are not based simply on ChatGPT, but they use large language models as a base and then build on it. I'm not going to explain every one of it, a bit of it, because it's complicated, but that's helping us get to what we need to be more brand proof, or what I call has brand integrity. And to use your example, it'll have direct response integrity because we're training them to do that.
We literally have 30 seconds left, so if you can ask a question that has a maybe one-sentence answer, that would be fantastic.
I'll try my best. So I have a question about kind of what he just asked. After you, typically in the creative process, that junk phase is very important because a lot of innovation comes out of that. So do you see, as we rely more on simulated intelligence and we're always trying to optimize for time, do you see like the authenticity of the work that'll be coming out in the future? Do you see that decreasing and us becoming more kind of plastic, you know, in the stuff that we produce?
I think that is absolutely 100% the danger and my biggest fear if we just relegate everything to the algorithm and to the machine or to whatever. That is, we will get, every brand's going to be commoditized, there's going to be no differentiation, no relevance. Those are fundamental drivers of buying behavior for brands and businesses. So absolutely. In combination, as a co-pilot, as an assistant, as another input into the creative process, we haven't seen it be dangerous. Today something came out, I'm not going to name brands, but they only use Sora. And they did a whole video. They're also a brand that talks about human imagination, and they used, just artificial intelligence platform. Massive backlash. Right? So I do not believe, I think we will get junk if we go to 100%. Press a button, out comes a video. Press a button, here's an ad.
So that warning is a perfect note to end on because we are over time. But I want to thank Dustin, Devika, and Americas for joining us for this fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.